For the first time ever, we had a second day for the round 2 of the NBA draft. It just wrapped up. We saw the first trade in Trajan Langdon's president of basketball operations career. We're going to talk about who he selected and the selection of Ron Holland on day 1 in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Koo Cahill. You can find me over on Twitter at Koo Cahill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply with Game Time. So I want to start off talking about, like I just said in the cold open, we're recording this right after the day 2, round 2 of the NBA draft. First time they've ever made it a 2-day event. I think it's only because of Bronny. I don't think they'll do it next year. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. But first time ever for a day 2, round 2. And we saw Trajan Langdon make his first trade as the Detroit Pistons president of basketball operations. So I want to talk about that and obviously who he selected with that pick he ended up trading for. Later on, we'll also move into talking about Ron Holland, obviously the Pistons' 5th overall pick. I want to get Hal's thoughts on that. And then we'll wrap up with what is next for the Detroit Pistons after the draft now. It's going to be a fun episode today. So, but before we get into any of that, how are you doing today, man?
I'm ecstatic, man. This is a holiday for me. This is my favorite time of year. So
yeah, well, at least you got to treat it like a holiday. You got to take the day off. I still had to wake up, go to work, and then come home. So I mean,
yeah, well, it's like the one day a year that it's like this, and like a few days around Christmas. Those are the holidays every year for me. I love the draft.
All right, well, let's get into some of the drafts then. So. Day 2, Trajan Langdon, he mentioned after the selection of Ron Holland in his presser, he mentioned to all of us that moving up and getting a pick in the second round was something they were going to consider doing the next day, which is now today, and they ended up actually doing that. They traded their late second round draft pick, which I believe was number 53, correct? They traded that for Wendell Moore Jr. and the 37th overall pick to the Minnesota Timberwolves. So, first off, I want to say that trade, I thought was a great trade. He took on salary, a minor salary. $2.4 million, I believe it was. So they went from $64 million to $2 million in cap space. So he took on some salary, not much at all, but some salary to get an early second round pick and then basically swap second round pick. So I thought that was a great value trade by Trajan Langdon for that to be his first deal. As the Detroit Pistons president of basketball operations. I don't think it's going to be his only trade this offseason, but for the first one, I thought it was a good value trade, and that's something I don't think we said many times over on the last regime. But with that pick, they went with Bobi Klintman. He is a Swedish professional basketball player. Hal, before I get your thoughts on Bobi, I went and asked multiple people that we respect in the draft community just to give me their quick notes on Bobi, because obviously I didn't know much about him. I didn't know anything really about him. But so I wanted to get someone else's people that I respect, their opinion and their scout on him instead of coming on here and lying and acting like I knew what I didn't know. That's
my move. Come on now.
Well, that's what makes me good, Hal, is that I get smarter because I know I'm not the smartest in the room. You feel me? It is what it is. But okay, so the first scout message or the scout review I got was from Bryce Simon, friend of the podcast. He is the co-host of the Amari Sankofa of the Pistons Pulse. He also has that podcast with Sam Vicini. So I want to read his scouting report of Bobi, and then we'll move on. He said, a long-rangey wing forward, I would say needs more time as a forward right now that offers some versatility as true off-the-ball offensive player. He definitely knows who he is and what he provides in terms of value on this end of the court. The shooting numbers may cause some people to question his floor spacing, but I am a believer, and he combines this with an awesome knack for off-ball cutting, where his ceiling is somewhat limited as what he can do when he has the ball in his hands. He has flashed the ability to attack closeouts and attack off the dribble with positive results, but is not nearly consistent enough. Defensively, there are real concerns on and off the ball, along with needing to show some more overall defensive playmaking. This did improve during his NBL season compared to his freshman year at Wake Forest, but there's definitely a lot more room for growth. And he also went on to say he had him in his early 30s on his board for this draft. Next person I got a quick report from is from our friend Roe. Does great stuff over at Swiss Theory. Dropped a really great article on Ron Holland before the draft about his strength creation. So really just go check out Roe. He's amazing on Twitter. You can find him. What's his Twitter? Oh, at Pick and Roll.
Yeah.
So go check him out. And he just gave me a quick few sentences. He just said, solid touch at 6'10", can shoot, catch and shoot shots well, some flexibility at that size on drives, but terrible at finishing at the rim and the half court. Has some tools defensively, but the effort level and motor is waning. So with all that, I talked for a minute trying to give everyone their, give as much perspective as possible. Hal, what was your report on Bobi Klintman?
It matches a lot of what Bryce had, right? He's roughly 6'9", 6'11" wingspan, so he's not a huge plus wingspan guy, but he is real tall, right? 215, roughly in that range. So he's got a little bit of muscle on him, but he's not like a big power forward. He's mostly like a space the floor and cut to the rim type wing, right? That's what he does. He has a little bit of a handle and a little bit of some passing chops, which is nice. He can kind of connect play a little bit. I don't love his decision making. He's one of those guys who was very late to basketball. He grew up in Europe, came over to play at I believe Sunrise Christian. He committed to a couple different colleges before settling on Wake Forest, and then when he tried to go into the draft last year, I guess he got some feedback that said, "Hey, we need you to work on some things," and he went and played in Australia. So he's had quite a bit of a journey already, and he's definitely a little rawer than maybe you might expect from a second-year guy who's played some professional basketball. It is to me, it's a little bit of the offensive decision making. He plays a little bit of point forward, like a point wing at times, especially when he plays for Sweden. But he's not really that creative, like pick and roll ball handler type. It's just more, he's got some clever dump offs and some stuff like that. The big thing though is he moves really well. He's a good runner and good across the floor. He's not at all explosive though. One of the lower vertical numbers at the combine, like a 32-inch max vert. That's what you expect out of centers. Really, it's not something you expect out of your wings. So covers ground well, but doesn't explode, and that's where you really see it in the finishing numbers. It pops up sometimes in the defensive things. On defense, he's real raw. He tends to ball watch or watch his man, but struggles to do both. He's a little late in rotations. He's active. I don't necessarily think he's like overly passive or like asleep on things. It's just he still has a ways to go. So I had him probably in like the 40-ish range in my ranking. So it's certainly good value where the Pistons got him. I wasn't mad at all about the value there, but to me, he's a guy who's going to probably be a G League project for a little while. I'm not sure he's a guy that comes in and plays right away.
So I wanted to ask you, so Ant Wright, friend of the podcast as well, who we've had him on a few times, he mentioned one of his, I think he tagged me in a quick recap on the Pistons draft. And he said that at the beginning of the year, it was thought that he would be a first-round grade. And as the season went on, kind of slipped a little bit. So one, do you agree with that he started the draft process more, or maybe not the draft process, but the season, as a first-round talent, kind of slid a little bit? And also, what is the sell? What's the sell for Pistons fans? What was the sell for the Pistons front office that made them pick him? What would you say is the sell and the belief? Where is that coming from?
So part of the reason he was thought highly of is right. This was a weird draft, right? There was a lot of confusion about who would actually land where the value was actually going to end up being. So part of it was just, this is a dude who was thought of well enough to do some combine stuff last year, right? He got some NBA buzz last year at Wake Forest. So that alone was like, hey, this is a returning sophomore. Clearly you look at him and it's like, this is an NBA sized player. He can shoot the three, right? So he shoots 36, 37% from three, mostly catch and shoots right now. He's got some footwork stuff he's got to clean up before I trust him to do a whole lot more. He's got inward pointed toes and stuff that make his base very unsettled at times. But he was thought of as maybe a second rounder last year, and you think, okay, you take a guy who was maybe expected to go in basically the same range last year, right? High, early in the second round. You let him go play professional. You expect that guy to move up 10 spots, 15 spots, and be a late first rounder. So certainly, I don't think Ant was wrong there. And then I think part of it was that he just came into this season and it didn't make a leap in any category, which is why he's still kind of a second rounder. It was like, okay, yep, he is who we thought he was, and not sure where he grew. The pitch is easy. It's this is a tall wing who isn't a complete idiot with the ball in his hands, right? He can do a little bit. He can do a little creation. He can do a little slashing. He's a very good cutter. That's I think Bryce mentioned that in his report, and I agree. He's a very good cutter. Despite not having a ton of explosion at the rim, he moves quickly and decisively, and that's very good. And then he can shoot enough, right? Especially catch and shoot threes from the corners. He can hit those at 35 to 40%. So he'll be somewhere in there. So that pitch, in the second round is pretty easy, right? You're gonna get a guy who's, he may not be an NBA player, but he's going to get a couple chances just because he's got the right tools, and that is an archetype of player that's really valuable, right?
So at this point, do you expect, if you had your own guess, do you expect him to become an NBA player? Would you be shocked if he became a legit rotational player? Where are you feeling your overall stance on him?
I wouldn't be shocked. I'd be shocked if it happened like in the next 2 or 3 years. I think he's a bit of a project, but it wouldn't surprise me. Again, it's a valuable skill set. If he can actually shoot, and if they can get him to just play, more mature defensive stuff and just get his IQ there, I mean, that you're going to get minutes because that's an NBA frame, and if you can shoot and play defense, you're in.
And to wrap it up, apparently his agent is among the tell-ems. I just answer this. Do you think he was a legit pick? Like the fact that he was picked at 37 by the Pistons. Do you think it was because they feel like him as a prospect, or are you buying the conspiracy that it's a tell-em agent, so that's why they picked him? Or do you think they actually liked him as a prospect?
Look, the allegations are not going away, right? You can't keep drafting a tell-em guy basically every draft and get rid of the allegations. They're going to stick around. I think he would have been drafted absolutely in this draft. If it weren't the Pistons, I think someone else would have gotten him. I have a sneaky suspicion they were looking at Johnny Furphy when they acquired this pick in the first place. I'm not sure that they made this move to go get him, which they've done in the past. So I'm not sure this was really a tell him thing. I think it's just a coincidence, but it's a coincidence that kind of rears its ugly head every draft. So, it's not like they can be they can't be mad that the allegations sit there every year when they keep doing this.
So all I'll say on Klintman is that one, absolutely swagged out for the draft. he was absolutely swagged out for the second round. That's first. And second, just listening to, I believe, oh my God, I'm drawing a blank. Who was the one that was providing the draft coverage for ESPN? Was it Givony or?
Oh yeah.
I believe it was
John
him.
Givony.
And he, the description he gave, immediately, I didn't know anything about him, but as soon as he gave his description, I was like, oh, that's a player I'd like. Okay, I get that. But after listening to some people talk about him, I understand it seems like he's a little bit more of a project, and we'll see if he actually latches on or not. I'm interested to see how he plays in the summer league. So I don't know if it was just simply a tell him pick, guys. I think it sounds like he was a legit NBA prospect that would have went around this range anyway. So I wouldn't hang up too much on that. But like you said, you keep doing it, it's going to be tough for you. It's just going to be tough to beat the allegations. But when we come back, though, I do want to ask Hal about Ron Holland, because that is the Pistons' main prize from the draft. That is the 5th overall pick, and that's the one that left people, whether it be for good or for bad, pretty shocked at the time that it happened. So we'll talk about Ron Holland coming up. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. And the reason why I love Game Time is because I'm a procrastinator. I wait to the last second with everything I do, and it oftentimes screws me over when it comes to tickets. But with Game Time, it actually saves me. You can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Any kind of events. near you. And another great thing about Game Time is you don't get the tickets, show up, and think the seats are terrible. No, you can see right in the app what your seats look like. You get panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed with Game Time. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So Hal, we're not gonna reference what just happened during the ad. We're not gonna talk about
what you're talking about.
We're gonna move past that like nothing happened. All right, Hal. So the Pistons last night when we were recording this, it's the 27th, so last night, but first day of the draft, they selected Ron Holland. And I think it's very fair to say it shocked a lot of people. Hell, it shocked Ron Holland. Ron Holland was shocked. After we got him on a conference call and we were able to ask him questions, I'm telling you guys, the quotes don't do it justice. His voice, he sounded like someone that was like, I don't know. I wasn't expecting to be here, guys. I don't know. Like he was shocked. So, and I think a lot of fans were shocked too, whether it be for good or for bad. I've already given my explanation that once Klingen fell to 5, I thought for sure they were trading back. I thought as soon as that happened, I was like, okay, everything went right. Someone's going to come up and trade some assets for you. Can fall back and you get the guy you like. I thought that for sure was happening. So I was shocked because of that. Not because I thought Ron Holland's a terrible prospect, just because I thought for sure that's what was going to happen. But Ron Holland ended up being selected. So before I turn it over to you, Hal, I do want to say this again for everyone who's listening. If you did not listen to the last episode, Ron Holland said he did not interview at all with the Pistons. He said he did not work out at all with the Detroit Pistons. He said he did not think he was going to the Detroit Pistons. And we didn't really have any indication before that Ron Holland was someone being considered. So I think that's where the place of shockment comes from. And also we'll talk about, the inevitable fit questions that everyone's talking about. But just immediately, Hal, when that pick happened, were you shocked?
I was. I was shocked like you that it wasn't a Klingen trade. I think basically my read kind of is that nobody believed that the Pistons would keep Klingen, and therefore they kind of lost leverage. I forget who picked next, but I don't think they were a plausible team either.
Charlotte. They went
yeah. So they've got Mark Williams. So I think it was Portland was like, no, we're not going to pay you for something we don't believe you're going to do. So I think they kind of lost leverage. Maybe if somebody had wanted to leapfrog Portland that badly, but I think Memphis was the other obvious team, and they it seems like we're happy with Edie. So you just kind of lose some value that I thought was definitely going to be there. But for me, Ron is number 2 on my board. So I was shocked in a good way, where I was worried that he was going to keep falling. It didn't seem like a lot of people agreed with my assessment personally. So I was kind of worried that it would be another prospect. So I was shocked in a very pleasant way when it was Ron.
And I do want to say, I said this on the last episode too, that people like yourself, a lot of people in draft Twitter that I respect, that do really good draft work, they were all really high on Ron Holland. I didn't see many people that I respect that do a lot of draft work that didn't have him like top 5 at the very least. A lot of people have him top 2, top 3. And I believe someone said that John Hollinger had him like top 2 as well. Like he was.
I think Hollinger was number 1. Yeah.
Yeah. So he had him number 1. So a lot of people. It doesn't seem like the NBA scouts were as high on him, at least what it seems like. But a lot of people I respect were really high on Ron Holland. I think everyone agrees that he's a high upside player. So, Hal, I do want to say, I do want to ask, since I did not think Ron Holland was really a consideration, so I didn't spend much time before the draft talking about him. And to be fair, I didn't talk about many individual prospects before the draft. I didn't have enough time to really dive into each prospect like I did the previous year. But I didn't really look into him at all because I didn't think it was someone they were going to consider. So I didn't have as much on the last episode to really talk about eval-wise. So can you give the listeners what your eval of Ron Holland was?
Yeah, well, so 6'7", 6'11" wingspan, right? So wing-sized player, right? Roughly an Asar-sized player, right? Same similar body type. really, really good athlete, right? He's got good vertical pop, but he's more of a glider, more of a horizontal athlete. A little more like Zach LaVine than Aaron Gordon is what I'd say, right? He's going to cover ground really quickly. Um, Watching him before the Ignite, right? So before he went to the Ignite, watching him with Team USA, watching some of his high school stuff, he was like a utility forward, right? Go get rebounds, defend the heck out of the ball, push in transition, but he wasn't doing a lot of primacy, ball handling, that kind of stuff, right? So he was just a guy who fit in at a high level, a really high level. I mean, he was doing that stuff enough to be a 5-star top of the class prospect, but he wasn't a create on ball guy. Go to the Ignite. The Ignite have no point guard on the roster worth talking about. They don't have a center really to talk about. I think they expected Modest to be more of a ball handler than he was, and it just ended up. This was a terrible context. The Ignite were a worse team than the Pistons were last year, right? Just a worse fit for Ron than the Pistons were for Cade, and that was kind of the focus of my eval is, okay, what does this guy look like when you don't make him do all the weird stuff he did? Because he took a ton of terrible shots, drove into traffic like crazy. And the takeaway is mostly that, like, this was a guy capable of driving into traffic. Like, he has an insane first step, incredible burst, a functional handle. He needs to get better, but like, he's more advanced, I think, than Asar was coming in. He's not the same level of like passer and feel that Asar is. But like, he was able to pressure the rim 7, 8, 9, 10 times a game and just really do it on the back of pure athletic traits in the G League, which is a messy league in many ways. But you have guys who are defending one-on-one for their lives and their jobs there. And so to beat adults like that repeatedly with no spacing on your team was a real credit to him. And then you see him do things, the ability to like drive to the elbow and immediately stop and pull up and shoot the like 17-footer. You want him to be a better shooter, right? We can talk about the shooting and it's a problem that he has to fix, but like the balance and the control to be able to get into those shots off of, to drive at full speed and immediately stop and shoot is the kind of thing that like makes Anthony Edwards special, right? So these are things that he keeps flashing as he plays. And then defensively, this is a guy with an awesome motor who can defend just about anyone one-on-one, rotates well. He needs to just be to kind of mature and learn. But I have no real complaints about what he was doing, especially given the kind of coaching and situation he was in at the Ignite. I think he's going to be a really good defensive player. So really, it was just about the offensive evaluation. What is he doing? And sometimes you say a player is flashing skills, right? You mean like, oh, I saw that once every other game. And with Ron, it was like, no, he's flashing something cool every other play. The problem is the plays when he wasn't flashing, he was making wild mistakes. And so you just have to hope that those mistakes and like some of the shots that he misses, right? You just kind of have to hope that some of that is the context and the Ignite and being in a terrible situation. And that, you just keep trimming away and trimming away and trimming away. And that in 4 or 5 years, you look up and it's like, oh, this guy's like an all-star because he has that kind of potential.
So I want to say I did watch today at work. Don't tell my employer. At work, I did watch.
You're saying that publicly, bud?
I did watch 3 G League games, 3 to 4.
So bad for you.
Like 3.5 G League games. I do want to echo what you said. G League's terrible. Like the spacing was horrific. Just the shot quality is just terrible. Like it's bad. But everything you said there, it did pop off the screen to me as well. Crazy athlete, like you said, a glider more so than like a explosive guy like that. Look, him as a prospect, I understand why they took him. Best player available, especially like I said in the last episode. No matter who the Pistons were going to take at 5, they were going to be a non-shooter. Either they were going to be a non-shooter, or you're going to have big questions about them as a shooter. The only other player you could take was Connect, and he went 17. So unless you were going to do a big reach at 5, like you were going to end up taking best player available, and he probably wasn't going to be able to shoot. Like that's just what this draft was. They were like they didn't have no choice with that. Like it is what it is. And unlucky for them, they fell to 5. So I mean, it is what it is. But I want to move on to the fit stuff because I think this is a fair conversation to have. Though I think some people maybe go too far off the rails. And maybe we'll go ahead and make this the last segment as well, so we can break it up a little bit. Because I don't want to run too long with this in just one segment. But you know what? Let's go ahead and wrap it up here, and then we'll move into the third segment, and we'll finish it off with just talking about this. But just real quickly, your answer on this is the fit questions, is the concerns over fit. Do you think it's a legitimate concern for fans to have?
I think it's a legitimate concern, but I don't think it's a concern for like this upcoming season, the way everyone kind of seems to be processing that question.
Do you want to wait till after the break to further explain that? Or?
Why don't we make that a teaser? Yeah.
Okay, there you go. That's the teaser. Make Hal the host of Lockdown Pistons. He's doing a good job with the teaser.
Buddy, I can't do those summer podcasts, man.
People don't get it, man. I be putting in work over here. This is tough, dog. Like, this is
labor.
Tough, dog.
That's what that is.
So stay tuned for that. Hear Hal's answer to that and what he means by that coming up. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review. Or whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on, that's another great way to support the podcast. All right, Hal, I'm looking at the timer. We're at 27 minutes. I'm going to give this segment the rest, like 13 minutes. Guys, everyone listening, we're going to go 13 minutes here. It's going to be a little bit of a longer podcast. You guys usually enjoy those, so not concerned about it. But Nick, forgive me, please. I think 40 minutes is fine, though. I think I'll be good. I think I'll be cool. All right, so go ahead and expand on that answer you had just given about it's not so much about this year.
Well, like, you can't expect to win 45 games this year, right? So I see a lot of people being like, well, I can't win with, non-shooters. And it's like, well, you're right. But your goal is to get like 32 wins, right? And you wish that you were in a position to win more this year, right? You wish that you'd won 28 last year so you could aim for 38 this year. It's not what it is, right? You're trying to double your wins. And can you do that if you have some inefficiencies on the team? Yeah, you can't. So do you have to play all these players together at the same time, right? No, you don't, right? You don't have to play Asar and Ron Holland at the same time. You don't even necessarily have to play them in the same games right now. Somebody can be in the G League. You go out in free agency, just go rent shooting, right? And when I say rent, I mean pay money for short contracts and just bring in guys that can shoot and help you build lineups that let you kind of toggle these kids on and off the floor. And, 2-3 years from now, hopefully one of them, all of them have learned to shoot. If they haven't, you have to make some decisions, and hopefully they're proven enough in their other skills that, like, if both Ron and Asar, for example, become great defenders who can dribble and score at the rim and pass, but neither one can shoot, and you probably have to pick one. As long as they're good enough with the other things, they'll probably have enough value that you can move them and do something, right? That's just part of the process of team building. And so to me, it's like, would it be great if they could all shoot and we could win 45 games this year? Yeah, but it's not really realistic, and it can't be the goal, and it can't be the only way you make decisions is how do I win more games this season? You're trying to win and build a process to win games in the future. And that's it's what Trajan Langdon has said in his press conferences, right? He's about building a process and setting this team up for success long term. And I think this is just part of that process. You still have plenty of money to go get, someone like a Tobias Harris. You could overpay KCP, right? Give him 2 years and $60 million just to come in and fill in the lineups around these players and see what you have and try and put them in positions to grow and do the things they do well for you, right? Put them in positions to do the good things right now. Try and avoid putting them in positions to do the bad things, right? If you play all of them together, then yeah, it's going to look bad when they're all bricking threes. If it's just, one of Asar and Ron on the floor, they can cut and move and run dribble handoffs and do all sorts of stuff, and you're not going to notice it as much, right? We saw Asar work in situations last year, as long as it wasn't like him and Isaiah Stewart and Jaden Ivey together, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, there's no one reliable on the floor. You can work around that, and thankfully they went and got Fontecchio. Hopefully Grimes is healthy. Hopefully he's still here. We've heard rumors and rumblings that maybe something is happening there, but like those are the kind of guys where like if it's Cade and Grimes and Asar and Fontecchio and Duran, you have enough spacing to try things and let guys grow. And so I think that's just the plan, is to just keep doing those kinds of things. And, again, hopefully 2-3 years from now is when you're really looking at this and saying, okay, do these guys fit or not? Have they grown enough? Right now, you can't worry about that.
So I think, to give my answer to this, I do think fit is a fair concern. However, like I said, there's a few things I go with this. One, like I said in the last segment, you were going to be drafting someone where this was going to be a question no matter what. Like, this was an inevitability. We are going to have this conversation no matter what. Like, it was just going to happen. That's the kind of draft this was. It's not so much about Ron, the prospect. It's not about Ron himself. I'm fine with him himself. I'm fine with this overall process either. Anyways, I'm just speaking to the side that has concerns. I understand the concerns. I tweeted this out today, and I think more than just fans agree with this. I think the concern is, and it's a fair one, is that last year the conversation was, okay, Asar can't shoot, but we have all this cap space. We'll go get the spacing in free agency. And then they didn't do that. They drafted Asar, and they did not go get spacing, and then they dealt with one of the worst shooting seasons, like actually the worst season in Pistons history. That's what happened. So the concern is now, okay, you did it again. Are you actually going to use the cap space you have now to address the spacing, or is it going to be the same thing like last year where you don't actually do that, and now you just added another non-shooter, and we still have not addressed the shooting? I think that is the concern, and I understand why you'd be concerned about that after. Look, when you win 14 games, when you have the worst season in the franchise's history, I don't blame any fan that has PTSD and is concerned about everything like that. I don't think people truly understand how bad this past season was. how bad this past season was. It's like, I get it.
You get to have healthy doubt about just about everything.
Right.
That's fair.
I completely get that. However, Ron is a really good prospect, and he's a high upside prospect. They believe he was the best player available at that spot. So I tweeted this out, I don't think the conversation needs to be about Ron Holland. I think Ron Holland was, if you were going for best player available and you had him at the top of your board, that's the best, that's the right pick. The conversation needs to be about what happens after now. What are you doing after Ron Holland? Because if you are not then making or creating an environment for your young guys to excel, then the fit stuff, then all that is actually going to rear its ugly head again, and it's going to ruin everything. It's going to ruin everything. So it's not Ron. I think everything that happens after Ron now is what matters. And I do think that's where I don't know if you did this on purpose, Hal, but you said something. I don't know if you did it on purpose, but I think whether you meant to or not, you were onto something. You mentioned about 2-3 years having to decide on these guys, and you only mentioned Cade, Asar, and Holland. I don't think Duran and Ivy are going to get to. I think they got to the deadline. That's what I believe is going to happen. They have to the deadline until there's going to be a decision made on them. I think there's a good chance, or maybe not a good chance. I think there's a chance that you might get a decision on them already, like by the end of this offseason. I think what the question is, and I'm going to be interested to see what the answer is from Trajan. I don't know what they're going to decide to do. I just think that I know that the question is, okay, we want to create this great environment for our kids. We want to create a good environment for our young guys to develop. Great. Can you create that young environment? Can you create that good environment while keeping all these guys together? Is it possible to do so? Can you create an environment? Is it going to be the best environment for your best guys, or the guys that seem like are their like main guys in Cade, Asar, and now Seam Holland? Can you do that by bringing all the young guys back? Is that a good environment? And James asked them this question after his initial press conference. And I think he kind of played both sides, which I thought was interesting. He kind of played both sides, and it was like, we like the young guys, blah, blah, I want to develop them, but you're right. You don't want to have all young guys, because then it can it can ruin an environment. It can cause trouble. So that's the question that I think fans are going to be waiting to see. I'm really interested to see how they answer it, because I do think that's the next, once you draft Ron, that's the next thing you got to decide. Are you bringing everyone back? Can you bring all of them back and have a good environment for your main guys? Or will that cause some trouble? That's where I'm at. Where are you standing on that? Do you think that's going to be a question that they're answering, or do you think that's out of bounds? Where do you stand on it?
No, I think it's a good question, and I think kind of the related question to me is, as Trajan and those guys review the roster, do they think they're done tanking? Right? Is this the year? Right? They've got the money, and they're not going to have this much money for a while, right? That they're going to have more flexibility, I think, unless they do something really, really crazy. But they'll have flexibility for a while. But they're not just going to have empty space for a while. Is this a year where they want to go try and win 32, 35 games, right? Do they want to make a big leap, go sign your Tobias Harrises, your KCPs, go sign your Hartensteins, right? These veterans who maybe you're going to overpay them a little bit from what the market wants, but you're trying to set a baseline and do what the Rockets did, right? You're trying to do that. You can do that if you think that among the young players you have, at least two of them are going to be legitimate all-stars, right? You have to have some faith in one of Holland, Asar, Ivy, Duren to really be that dude moving forward, because that's what you need, at least two of those guys to be, an elite team. If they don't think they've got that, then where are they going to go with that money? What are they going to do with it? Because they might be thinking, well, Cooper Flag's coming up, Cam Boozer's coming up in 2026, right? You might be thinking about more talent. And if they're thinking about more talent, that's where it gets concerning, because that's what Troy Weaver was doing, right? He was saying, well, I'll just tank again, right? It won't be that bad. I'll just tank again. And they kept making decisions that just didn't build a good enough roster. And eventually the surrounding talent just kind of disappeared on him. And he had a team that won 14 games. You can't do that anymore. So, walking the middle ground between, finding the line of like, how do you win at least 25, 26, 27 games and just look, respectable? And then do you push that and try and go a little further? How far do you want to go? I don't know exactly where he is on that scale of wanting to actually tank or wanting to really push. And I think the play-in is outside the realm of possibility personally. But do you want to at least make it look like you're trying for that, right? Do you want to make that kind of progress? That's kind of an open question for me. And it really depends on his evaluation of the youngsters. But I think that's kind of what I'm thinking about now is where does he really want to, what's his vision for the next 2 years?
Yeah, look, I completely agree with you, and that's what's going to be the most interesting part about this part of the offseason is that, I've been saying this on the podcast for a minute. People can believe me or not. I have heard throughout the whole offseason that they are really high on Asar. Now, that was before they got Trajan, but then Trajan basically echoed that at his after drafting Holland, that he really likes Asar and Holland, believes they can be really good together in a few years, maybe not initially. But I've nonstop. All I've heard is that they really look at Asar like a cornerstone. Like he is, like they are very high on Asar.
What player on this roster looks the most like a player that would play for the Pelicans, right?
Correct. Right.
Like
yes.
all those wings they drafted, it's Asar and Ron are the two guys where it's like those two would have been in New Orleans if they could have been.
Correct. I completely agree. So my thing is, I just really am wondering what their decision is on Ivy and Duren. Because I think that has to be the next. Are you going, like you mentioned this on the last time you were on the podcast? Are you going and paying big money to a starting center? And if you do that, what are you doing with Duren? Are you convincing him that, hey, you're just going to be our bench big for the next 4 years? Like, is that something that he's going to be on board with? Is he going to have buy-in on that? Is that the best use of your value with him, your resources with him? Like Ivy, do you believe in Ivy as like you were saying, like one of those future guys? If not, is now the time to move on from him? These are the questions that I'm really interested in seeing what they what they decide on. I don't think it's on Holland. I think, and maybe this might be a little prematurely, but this is just what I'm reading on. I think Trajan has this, what he prefers as, and this maybe not Trajan, but just the Pistons org has their 3 guys that they really like right now. I think they got Cade, Asar, and Holland. I think those are the main guys right there. And I think there's open-ended questions right now on Ivy and Duren. And the question, like we just mentioned, is that, okay, can you bring those guys back and try to develop all of them at the same time? Is that something you can do? Or do you need to move on from some of them to bring in more vets so it better helps your main 3? Like that's the question they got to answer, and I'm interested to see what they do. So last question I have for you. if you had to put money on which route they go this offseason, which route do you think they go? At not even, you don't have to be specific about who they trade if you do go that route. Just, do you think they go the tanking route? Do you think we might see another offseason where they don't actually use the cap space to get veterans that can actually impact the game? Like, what route do you think they're going to go at this time? And then we're going to wrap up the podcast.
I think they're going to try and kind of split the middle. I think we're going to get at least one guy that they sign to like a real contract that's, like a Tobias Harris level player. Like at least one of those guys that's legitimately brought in to be a starter and contribute. And, I think we're going to keep at least, the young guys around at least until the deadline. I think you probably want to see where they are with your new coach, whoever that ends up being. And
Fred Vinson, that really, screw the coach. Who cares about the head coach? It's Fred Vinson. Fred Vinson it might be the most important acquisition in Pistons history. Like,
look, if he gets one of Asar or Holland to like 35% from three, right? You build him a statue, 100 feet tall, right in front, right out in that plaza in front of LCA. You just big old statue.
They're asking him to turn water into wine, and look, we'll see if he does it. He has a really good. He seriously might be the best shooting coach in the world. Like, he's one of the best, like in the world, quite literally. So, I mean, we'll see what he does, but I do think that's a really big possibility too. You're right. I think it's a good chance that they wait till the deadline. I think the deadline's the latest, though, that you're going to get that decision. I think that's when they start making some decisions on guys.
I do think, though, that is just the biggest possible endorsement of Trajan Langdon as a GM, right? As a POBO here, is he saw a problem, he went and fixed the problem, right? There's a lot of GMs that have not done that around the league, right? That it says a lot about him and backs up his statements of, this is a process and we're going to go through the process and make something and build something, that he went and immediately went and got, for my money, the best shooting coach in the NBA. I have a lot of faith in Fred Vinson. What he's done for Brandon Ingram, et cetera, has been really, really important. So it speaks a lot to something, that they're following up on their statements already, which is not something we had with the last regime. I'll tell you that much.
Oh yeah, we'll wrap up the podcast with this. I think Trajan is a great interview, very straightforward, transparent. I think fans are really going to like him. And hopefully his moves back that all up. Because if they do, I think they're really going to love Trajan. So we'll wrap it up there, though. Thank you, Hal, for coming on, man. Hal was originally supposed to come on for just one segment, then stayed on for 44 minutes. So I really appreciate it. But you guys can follow him on Twitter @HalBridius. Appreciate you guys. Thank you for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel @Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Stay safe out there. Till next time, peace out.